Welcome, Third Rock listeners, to the Branding Laboratory. I'm your host, Deevo, Chief Experience Officer for the Brand Storyteller and the Fusion Creative Brands. And each week, I have the privilege of speaking with extraordinary leaders and entrepreneurs who are reshaping the way industries work. These conversations go way beyond the surface to explore the core philosophies, the lessons, and the challenges that define the brands that we admire today. And one of the greatest rewards of this podcast is the opportunity to share the insights of some of the brightest minds in business, people who are passionate about pushing boundaries and redefining what's possible. And as I always say, the stories we tell are the brands we build. And this show is a testament to the power of that concept. Let's dive in. On this week's episode of the Branding Laboratory, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Tevia Hoalst. She is the innovative CEO and founder of Tekoda Accounting. Tekoda, Tekoda. And we explored how she's challenging the status quo in the accounting industry and shifting the focus from not just focusing on the numbers, but truly partnering with clients to help them succeed and understand how they can better manage their financials, their bookkeeping, their accounting, and then working with CPAs to sort of share that data to help them better articulate and address how to manage a client's portfolio and taxation, et cetera. And it's a brand that really cares about its customers. And in my conversation with her, it's very clear that not only does she understand the industry, but she's very, very articulate and comprehensive in how she manages her company. And so we're going to talk about how she's refining her brand message. We're going to go into my favorite things, brand messaging, tackling the challenge of finding out who her ideal customer is. We talked a little bit about that. I gave her some tips and some ideas, but she's already well on her way. And navigating imposter syndrome, which we all face as CEOs, while still maintaining her voice in an antiquated industry. So whether you're interested in reimagining your own business, or you're learning how to communicate your powerful brand story, or learn from an amazing CEO like Tevia, this episode is packed with some actionable insights and takeaways, especially for early entrepreneurs and people who have been in business for a while and are looking to sort of either tackle human resource issues or values alignments and things of that nature. So if you're ready to break away from an outdated model yourself and take your business to the next level, you're not going to want to miss this conversation, because we have real talk, candid conversation about entrepreneurship, brand strategy, and the human side of leadership. Check it out. All right, welcome, Third Rock listeners, to the Branding Laboratory. I'm your host, Deevo, Chief Experience Officer for the Brand Storyteller and the Fusion Creative Brands. And today I have a fascinating guest coming on who is disrupting. I know it's a term that we often use in the entrepreneurial world, and I feel like sometimes people have misnomers on what disruption actually is. But we're going to talk to her about sort of what she's doing in all the different spaces that she's operating in her entrepreneurial career. And really just hopefully we can have some takeaways and insights. So welcome, Tevia. How are you doing? Tevia, how are you doing?
Nice to meet you, Deevo. I'm grateful to be here and I can't wait to have a fun conversation.
I got your name right in the green room and then I messed it up in the introduction. So apologies for that.
Not the first time. It's totally fine.
So you have an accounting firm. It's called Tekoda. Is that correct? And one of the things that I loved about you and why I said I'd get her on the show, I want to talk to her, is you talk a lot about it's not just about the numbers. It's about partnering and partnerships and collaborations and sort of this whole connectivity and the ethos of entrepreneurial world and your contacts, and one of the things that you talk about most is like adding value to your business. And so my first question, just to sort of get to know you a little bit, can you take us back to the beginning? What inspired you to start Tekoda? What was that pivotal moment when you knew you wanted to disrupt the industry?
Sure. The disruption comes from culture and actually comes from our team. So I was just in an environment that many have experienced that was unhealthy and poor. I was in corporate environment and just really didn't feel valued. And just the growing need to affect that positively. That was really our catalyst. Several other things happened along the way to where I ended up going ahead and leaving and knowing that I needed to start my own thing. But my phrase I always say, that is what I said to my husband, is I don't even know what I'm going to provide yet, but it has to be a phenomenal culture where people want to be and they give their best to our client because I have done a good job creating value for them.
Mm.
And that's really where it comes from. And that today, the basis of the company is we have the very best team and they want to be here and they give the very best to our clients because that's where the priority is, because I believe that that better, serves the client in that
Mm.
way.
So that's all sounds good on paper, and there's a lot of cliche pieces in that. But I want to get back to sort of more of who you are, if I may, for a second. And I'm not calling you out, by the
Sure.
way, but I want to really get to sort of like who
It's
is this
okay.
at the core, right? So you
I
mentioned
can
you,
take it.
yeah, you mentioned you were in the corporate world, which is kind of crazy because a lot of the people we get on the show were our ex corporate pats, if you will, that, and they all sort of had this. We all have the same story: uninspired, tired of the
Yeah.
monotony, tired of the bureaucracy, tired of the red tape, tired of the this slow moving machine. So, just a little bit about your background, just so people understand your expertise. You're an accountant, and you were doing or just kind of give me some space on that.
Sure. No, I am actually not a certified accountant for a reason. My background is in international business and finance, and I do have a background in accounting, bookkeeping, business building.
Mm.
I have never gone and gotten my CPA license for a reason. I don't want to be the CPA running the business. I want to be an entrepreneur running a company.
Well said.
So every decision I make comes from what do I need to do from an entrepreneurial standpoint and how do I provide to the client from an entrepreneurial standpoint. I think there's many, many, many financial brains out there that are very good at what they do, but they are not business owners first and foremost. So that's the division that is very different for us.
What is that difference to you? You said you're not a CPA, you're not an accountant, you're a businesswoman, you're an entrepreneur. What is that difference in your words?
For me, it goes back to E-Myth, which is a very known
Mm,
book.
yeah, yeah.
And E-Myth is about, are you the technician that started a business because you saw opportunity likely to have more of the profit? Or are you the entrepreneur, the visionary that you had no other choice but to go on this path because that was all that was going to work for you? And I believe that most in the accounting industry, there is a huge problem where it's not very service based. How many clients are listening to this podcast that they pay their bill and they aren't really sure what they're getting? Are they getting tax strategy from their CPA? Are they getting communication from their bookkeeper or CPA? The answer is usually no. And so we are approaching it from a different avenue that I am not the technician running the company, meaning I'm heads down, I'm still doing tax returns, I'm still doing books. That's not how we operate. I run our company and I run our vision, which is basis around service. And therefore, our customer service is at a much higher value
Mm.
than I think what's average.
You said E-Myth, and you're referencing the book, which is sort of a legendary book for entrepreneurs. And in this, the centerpiece of that is: are
Yeah.
you working in your business or are you working for your business? And sort of like, if you are an entrepreneur, how do you shift your approach to business so that your business is operating for you and you're not sitting there burning, like working, people complain like working 100 hours a week type of thing. So I get that. What kind of a CPA are you? And I sort of have a question around this because I have my own bookkeeper, I have my own accountant. And interestingly enough, one of the things I complained to last week to Melissa, my operations director here, is like, are they actually working for us, or are they just going down a checklist? Are they actually taking a look at our books, and are they working with our bookkeeper and they're saying, okay, here's how we can save money, here's some tax law things that we can work with? Because it's like, I feel like no matter what we do, we're kind of always working against this machine of the government taking our money. And sorry for anyone who's listening, if you're a government worker, I make no qualms about it. I want my money to be working for my business. And I want to make sure that my accountant and my bookkeeper and my firm is working for my business that has our best interests and not just like checking off a list. So what differentiates what you're doing, Dakota, as an industry leader from what like a traditional person that I just described is?
Yes. So the way that we approach the industry is we are incredibly proactive. So our clients, our turnover is less than 1%. And the reason is we go to our clients proactively. We want you to know we're there. We communicate with you a lot, and we are looking to proactively point out things like what you said. So the one thing we don't do, we call ourselves, it's internal accounting. So any accounting the business could need, bookkeeping, payments, sales tax, invoicing, anything of that realm is what we cover for companies. The one thing we don't do is we do not file taxes. And it's exactly what you're talking about. I believe that the bookkeeping and the tax should be separate because we should be working for you. We should be earning your business. And when your bookkeeper works up under your tax CPA, they're never going to talk to you. They're not there for you. They serve the CPA, and the CPA is there to file your taxes. They're not there for business analytics and business growth and all the things that go with that. So we have to show our value in that we have to come to you in a communication positive way and a proactive way and say, here are some things that maybe you aren't thinking about because you're not an accountant,
Yeah, yeah.
and say, this could benefit you. We have 10 other clients, 50 other clients in your industry, and they're doing it this other way, and it seems to be benefiting them. Do you know about it? Your margins are different than the average of your industry. Are you aware of that? And we come and we kind of proactively say, most business owners only ever see their own financials. We see hundreds of companies' financials, and we get to bring that proactively and say, let's help you, move the needle.
So Dakota, you're not accountants, you're not bookkeepers per se. You're calling yourself business analytic people that look at a company's financials and then make recommendations, put all that together in a systematized way, and then you hand that off to our CPA to file. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, so just the tax piece is separate. So a tax firm, it can be different from an accounting firm because accounting is accounting for everything within the business, right? So
Mhm.
bookkeeping falls into that, paying bills, doing invoicing, that's accounting of your company.
Mhm.
That's why tax firms that do both are called such and such tax and accounting firm, because tax is not necessarily the internal accounting. So what we do not do is file your taxes. We team with a CPA, and we like to do that because they should be keeping an eye on that our work is quality, and we can also keep an eye on, are they serving you the best that they should be? Because frankly, myself as a business owner, I have gone through several CPAs because I have a high bar. I know what they should be doing. I know
Mhm.
how they should be serving, and I will move my own company if I don't feel like that service is there. So.
Perfect. So if I were to come to you and say, "Hey, I've been working with the CPA firm for the last few years, but I sort of feel like they're not really necessarily looking out for my interests. I'd like you to take a look at what's going on." You would come back and you would give us recommendations, and then you would go to the CPA firm and just sort of say, "Okay, this is what we'd like to see going forward. Is this possible?" Or do you just automatically say, "No, we have our own group of CPAs that would recommend that you work for because we've already vetted them, yada yada yada." How does that play out?
We do have a short list that we like how they serve a client, but we are always open to meeting new CPAs
Mhm.
because we like to work synergistically with them. We like to be introduced to them because we'll remove as much of the weight for the business owner as we can, and we will communicate between each other and try to, make sure that it is a very seamless situation for you, the business owner.
Mhm.
But we do, like I said, we have some we like, but we love to expand that list because it's devastating to me at frankly how short it is of names that I would confidently give out, not only because they are going to talk to you, they're going to actually give you tax strategy, but they're also affordable. I mean, there is a shortage in the accounting industry for every position.
Got it.
And that creates a scenario where they can charge, essentially what they want and give you whatever service they want. And
Got
so
it.
our, you know, disruption, if you will, is to come out and say, I would like better and
Mhm.
I will give better.
You're the bullshit caller outers.
Yes.
So, Aaron, if you're listening, you're on notice. I'm going to stick Tevia on you in a minute. So, I want to talk a little bit about how you got into this space before we talk about the other things. So, you worked in the corporate world for how many years? How would you say?
Ooh, 5, 6 years.
Five, 6 years. And was it a slow kind of rumination that this is really not what I'm cut out for? or were there some epiphanies during the process of working? Because I remember in my own story, if I may share for a minute, I started off straight out of college, went straight into college, into the corporate workforce. I was just looking for the mighty greenback because I'd never had any mentors. My parents weren't involved in my sort of upbringing, and I just was like, hey, I'm supposed to go to college, get my degree, and then go work for the man and do the things or the woman, whatever it may be. And I just remember getting into it, and I was like, there has to be more to this because this is really
Yeah.
boring and I don't really feel very inspired. And I come from a creative background. And so, but I didn't follow my creative dreams. I went straight into sort of like something completely different, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise, by the way, because I learned actually how to run a business through that process. But even throughout that process, I just remember thinking, and I did this for 15 years, so not just five. And so I got exposed to all these different levels of business and I learned all these different things from branding and marketing and project management and technology and all these things. But I just remember thinking every step of the way, dude, there has to be something more to my life. Like, I don't see myself being a lifetimer doing this for 35 years. And I just remember thinking, what's my corporate exit strategy? So after about year five, I started coming up with ways that I could do that. So sorry, thank you for hearing me out. Was your story similar, or was it just kind of like the minute you got in there, or were there some epiphanies in that process of the 5 years that made you say, there's got to be a better way to do this?
Yeah, there were definitely flags, I would say, throughout. I mean, one thing I picked up on very quickly, I came from financial analytics, so I'm constantly looking at data, and statistics and what's going on. And I recognized very quickly that my entire department was poor morale, very unhappy for, a multitude of different reasons, but it really came down from, not feeling valued. And I recognized years before I hit even my 5 year that it seemed as though once people hit their 5 year, they did not feel they could leave because they couldn't start over somewhere else and make equivalent money. And so I knew in the back of my mind with all these red flags that were going on, and same thing, I'm questioning, like, why is it done this way? And it just wasn't appreciated that I said, I need to figure out what I'm doing by 5, because if I make it there and stay, I'm going to potentially fall in the same rat race of, I just can't afford to go. And I really only made it that long because at that time, I was providing the insurance for my family. So it
Mhm.
was a necessity to be there. But very quickly, my husband and I had an opportunity to potentially buy a business on the later end of that time frame. And that's what kicked off for me, like, oh, I could be in charge of my own destiny. I could own my own company, which had never really been on the radar up to that point. And it kind of clicked that, like, oh, I think I'm actually entrepreneurial. And that's why I'm hard as an employee, because I want to ask questions. I want to improve. I want to iterate. I don't want to sit here and play Candy Crush on my phone and
Mhm.
work half of my time at this place. So anyway, all to say, we started down a road of buying a business and that actually fell apart. And when that fell apart was that pivotal moment you're talking about where I said, okay, I'm already 1 foot out the door mentally.
Mhm.
I'm not bringing that foot back. And now I have to figure out my path. And
Mhm.
that was opening, to the first iteration of Dakota and doing it on my own and taking the accounting and bookkeeping knowledge that I had honed from a somewhat sort of mentor that I had in a second job that I had, and taking it from there.
Got it. Is your husband's name Dakota or something?
No, my husband's name is Shane.
What is behind the name Dakota?
Yeah, so we were originally Coda. Bookkeeping was our first iteration of the company,
Mhm.
and we did some research later on. And the word Coda is actually a native word, and it comes from service and
Mhm.
giving back is
Mhm.
kind of the etymology of it. And I really liked that. My Newfoundland's name is Coda, and that's kind of how we knew
Mhm.
about it and turned it into our company. And when we had to change because it was too close to a few other names, so we couldn't own it, and we were looking to own our name, I have clients who have done a mashup of their names because, as anyone who's tried to buy a business name knows, everything good is taken at this point, and
Mhm.
so a mashup is all there is.
Mhm.
So the new iteration is, my husband came up with it, is my first two letters and preserving Coda.
Got it.
So
That's why I was asking
yeah,
is his name Dakota because I thought I knew TE was part of that. At least I figured it was.
yeah.
I wrote a couple things down. Sorry, I will look at my notes here. Oh, In terms of advice, because you sort of been through this space, what would you say to early entrepreneurs if you had the opportunity to speak to them, which you now do on this platform, that they are either going straight into the corporate world for an opportunity or to start an entrepreneurial gig, and they may or may not have fleshed that opportunity out, like both of us had not early on, but they sort of have an idea. What would you say to them right now if you could speak to them and say, "Hey, like I recommend that you at least go get your feet wet, or you know what, just jump all in, burn the ships, and go after it." What would you say to an early entrepreneur?
I think a couple of things. One would be do some more fact finding. Maybe go work for an entrepreneur. I don't think it's not a good idea to have the corporate background because I did take
Hmm.
positives from that.
Agreed.
And
Agreed.
more so, I know what I don't want. And that was really informative to building the company because I knew what path not to go down. And so if you do have that background, great. Just pivot and use it in a positive way for you. But also, what I ended up doing unintentionally is I'm very driven. So when I was in college, and then right when I left college, I had this corporate position, but I also had a second job. And that second job was uh, for an entrepreneur. So I got both different tastes and I got to learn in both ways. So I would say leverage your time and go work for small business, see what the corporate megalith is about, and just see what works for you and take the positives that you can from both and go down your path. I mean, people fall into, which I don't think is good advice, like I have said it before too, just do it sooner. But sometimes you don't have the knowledge or the background to do it right sooner.
Mm,
Sometimes you need that education, you need what you went through to then go and be successful at it.
mm. That's good advice. When I look back at my entrepreneurial journey and I sort of take a look at these pivotal moments that help define what my business looks like, and from my perspective, it's been multiple iterations. So I'm now on my fourth business. I sold my last one and then had to close down another one. And there's a lot of things that happened in that process. And if I were to sit down and look at that matriculation and say, these are the lessons that I learned, these were pivotal things. And these are all centered around bad partnerships that I made. Poorly constructed partnerships was another business, not clearly defining what my true value proposition is, like what was my gift to the universe in terms of what my problem was my business solving, and some other things. And I can there's a laundry list of things that I can share with you. When you look back so far at and how long you've been doing this entrepreneurial stuff with Dakota?
6 years.
Wow, that's great. Congratulations, by the way. I meant to ask you,
Yeah.
did you wait for the 5 year plan so you could get your lapel pin 5 year anniversary for the corporation?
I think I know I got 5 years in, but I was 1 foot out on my plan.
Well,
So
let me tell you, you missed out because I had the 15 years. I not only have a lapel pin, I also had a telescope and a pair of binoculars for my 15 years. So I was like, wow, I feel so special for after 15 years of blood, sweat, and tears, I get some binoculars. Thank you, corporation. But anyhow, sorry, I digress. So pivotal moments, and I look at the lessons that I've learned so far, and I'm like literally every day is a lesson, right, for me. Like there's always something from hiring people to picking out the ideal clients that you work with to sort of understanding what your story is and how do you connect with people on an emotional level. Like I could go on and on and on. When you look back at some of the key pivotal moments in your 6 years so far, what were some of those that have shaped the trajectory of where your business is today?
mm, a couple. One has actually been more recent in the last year and a half. Is we are fully remote. We work nationwide. And because of that, when we originally started, it did matter where I was at because I was generating all of the business and it was all networking. And so we were very heavily, in the area that I was in. I made a very intentional move to say, I'm going to take myself out of this physical location for multiple reasons because I really wanted to force us to figure out marketing and figure out leads without it coming from me being boots on the ground because I knew that that would be a bottleneck. So
Mm,
that was a huge pivot for us. And, we're still learning it. It's working, but it was intentional to take
mm,
away my presence and say, I'm not going to live anywhere where I have to lean on me to go out and to meet owners and
mm,
to make that connection. So we're still doing it, but we do it in different ways. And we are branching out to having it work from more pipelines than just myself. So that's one. Another one I would say would be from coming from our hiring. It was incredibly powerful. I was an early member of Entrepreneur Organization and their accelerator program. which is a sub seven figure group that is there to really harness you into being a seven figure company and then getting to go to the big group. And that
Is
what
that
I learned
is that like a
there,
mastermind group? Is that what you're getting at? Sort of like a mastermind group?
it's an entrepreneurial group, and it's not about networking. It's all about peer sharing.
Hmm.
So here's an issue I'm having in my business. You know, how do you relate to that? How did you solve it? You know, it's all about entrepreneurs kind of putting their mind together and having an open ear for each other when you usually have a hard time getting a hold of other entrepreneurs sometimes.
Hmm.
It's been incredibly pivotal. The moment I could join it, I knew about it. I joined. And one thing that we learned there is we hire using a company called Culture Index. It's personality testing. It's legally allowed to be used in hiring because of the accuracy. And nailing in our hiring was huge
Hmm.
because before, I did my best to hire who had the skill and the right buy-in to, the culture that I needed, but it was hit or miss, just like anybody else does. And you have to learn along the way. And being able to find this nugget of knowledge and use that to lean on for not only hiring, but for managing our current team has been a complete game changer. We have very, very low turnover in our staff. And I equate that to learning how to hire really well.
Interesting. That group you're talking about, the entrepreneurial, just sorry, one more question on that. Is that something local to your market or is this a national organization? Because it sounds like a mastermind concept.
It's international. It's called Entrepreneurs Organization. There's hundreds of thousands of members around the world, and you join usually a local regional group to you, and then they break into forums of like 6 to 10 entrepreneurs,
Hmm.
and you meet monthly, and you bring what your challenges are, and you kind of all like group share, and it's been incredibly pivotal.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I'm gonna check that out. I actually have my own mastermind group that I launched for the very similar purposes
Okay.
as having a group of accountability and peers, successful entrepreneurs, and we have criteria. You know, you have to make six figures, you have to have been in business for at least 5 years, all these sorts of things. But the biggest takeaway I have from that is that I have a group that I meet with on a regular basis where I can come to and say, I have this challenge here, I'm having this problem here, I'm trying to do this, et cetera. And having this people around you, which brings me to a really interesting point, is how important it is, and you've already talked about your in terms of your employees, but how important it is to have and surround yourself with individuals who inspire you, who educate you, who hold you accountable, because you are a byproduct of the people you surround yourself with. So it's really important that whether they're your peers or they're your employees or your partners or your friends, that you're like surrounding yourself with really cool people. So I have a question for you in terms of hiring and this personality litmus that you're using, because I do something similar with my clients when we're trying to really figure out their brand. One of the things I have been using for the last few years in terms of figuring out their voice and their messaging is understanding the CEO behind the business first and foremost. So we use a lot of psychometric factors and analysis tests to sort of understand, like, who are you as an individual, and where are your shadows, and where are your critical points for growth, and where are you looking to expand, and like what's your big juicy audacious dreams, because then that helps us build, like, what's their messaging going to look like, what's their value going to look like to their audience. So
Sure.
going back to your statement about the hiring and how you've done such an exceptional job with that, who do you look for, or let me rephrase that. When you look at your personality profile of the people that work in your frame in your business, are there some few qualifiable metrics, psychometrics you can say, my 25 employees or whatever we have, they all sort of fit this and this?
Yes. So the answer is yes and no because we have different departments. So what we do is for every position that we have to hire, we build a profile. So we do hire for a certain profile and they change as it would for every company. Depending on the seat you need to fill, you need a different profile. So we very heavily go for culture fit. One of the first interviews that we do, we have a culture manager and she runs an interview with the person before they've even been finally skill tested and make sure that we have a really good culture fit. Then we go into some really heavy skill testing, but for specific to say our bookkeepers, which is our main team, we are looking for very high D people that are detail oriented, that of course have the background in education and what we need, and we take what has failed before, what we have maybe let people go for large mistakes or not getting it. We take what we've learned from those failures and we put them into the hiring, and we say, okay, here's your scenario. How would you solve this? What
Hmm.
would you do? What is your accounting knowledge? Things like that. So we're constantly iterating that process because, every time we do disconnect from someone, we do a debrief,
Hmm.
right? Of what could we have done better? How could we have supported them better? We try to do that portion before there's ever a disconnect, but once it happens, and we go and we say, what did we miss about them?
Hmm.
What was off in their skill set? What was off in the culture fit? And we constantly debrief that and then bring it into the scenario of the new hire and say, okay, let's try to like get this better.
I love that. And I love that you have a process in place. One of the things that always annoyed me about the corporate space, and I feel like I'm just talking shit about the corporate space. Let me just reiterate. I think that it's an opportunity for a very specific type of person. And if that's you,
Yes.
go be. I'm not defaming it. I'm just simply saying that I wasn't cut out for that. But that being said, I learned a boatload of things that are now helping me and I'm utilizing today in my business. But one of the things that always annoyed me was the quarterly check-ins and sort of like my performance reports. And it feels like for me, it was just very staged. It was very monotonous, and it didn't really take a look at what I was actually doing behind the scenes and the impact that I was having on whether it's my internal client projects or my external client projects. It was just sort of like a standard. It's like standardized testing in the modern public school
Yeah.
classroom. It's like, how are you going to tell the impact I'm actually making on this silly questions? And so, in terms of you, because you have a human resource issue with your employees, how are you maintaining? You have these really high standards for hiring, but how are you maintaining as they matriculate through the organization over time to make sure that they're not only adhering to existing standards, but they're growing and expanding and helping the company grow?
Yes. So we actually go back to our tool that we use for hiring. It's called Culture Index. And it's really neat because there's two graphs that Culture Index gives you. It gives you who the person is on paper, which the first time they
Mm.
take it, that will never change. And there's a second graph. And the second graph is actually they answer, it's just a set of vocab questions, but it maps out how are they matching their position. And so every time that we go around and do our conversations with our staff, we actually have them retake it. And that
Mm.
second graph is for managing your employee. And what it will show you, essentially, what you're trying to get to is that the bottom graph matches the top graph. And what that tells you, you have right person, right seat, right capacity, right amount of bandwidth because they're really naturally in the state of who they are. Now, when you get someone that maybe their graph is completely inverted, or maybe they're a really wide graph, but it's very narrow on the bottom, something like that, you know that you have challenges that you need to communicate with them about them either being in the wrong seat, maybe they're over challenged, maybe they're being burnt out, maybe they're under challenged. And we use those tools because, as you're saying, not every manager has the tools to really have a good conversation with an employee. So when we can find good tools to effectively make our management more successful in those conversations and actually have on paper, a lot of our staff, I credit it to my partner. She's phenomenal at doing this. Like, I'm speaking about it, but most of this is as her room of her job of what she does, our COO. But a lot of our staff, their profiles match at this point.
Hmm.
And it's because we have worked so hard at who are you? What do you need to be successful? Where do we need to push you to grow? What, education do we need to provide for you? And that has happened enough that a lot of those graphs are now matching. And so I think it's a combination of like willingness and want to get there as the management team,
Hmm.
but also using the right tools to help you hone that in.
I love that. And I'm just curious about because you seem like you're very hands-on in terms of the CEO role that you play. And I'm always interested in why people choose to become a CEO or why people choose to become an entrepreneur. And you're a CEO and an entrepreneur. When you look at your career in the last 6 years, do you feel that your position as a CEO is to build the people within the organization or focus on the bottom line of the company?
Hmm. Um, No, the bottom line is not my job. That's my CEO's job. She's in charge of budget, forecast. Are we on what is the goal? Are we on the goal? That those are her things. My two things that I own is I'm big vision. I'm where are we going? What are we doing? And then having a conversation with her of what's the plan and are we on plan and how do we pivot to get on plan if we're not? Two is I own culture. As you were saying before, the psychographics of the CEO, the company is me, and not to say I need and want the company to have its own brand and own profile, but from day one as an entrepreneur, especially in a services business, when you're building mission statement, core values, all those things, it's who you are and your
Mm,
ethics.
sure.
And so the basis of who we are is me. And so I have to stay very engaged in culture to ensure that really I'm delivering on what my core value was to do, which was to create a great workplace.
I love that. Who holds you accountable?
Oh, my COO.
So,
She holds me
so,
very accountable.
so you're the owner of the company, but you have a CEO that is sort of an acting CEO. Is that what I heard you say, or is that you say
No,
COO?
she's the COO.
Oh God, I
Yes.
thought you said you had a CEO that you were sort of letting run. So I like what you said because I think that your company, in addition to yourself and your personality and all those things, your company is a reflection of who you are at your core and what your values are, and the people that work with you and for you, they should sort of be very clear about what that is, and so that you sort of have
Yeah.
this North Star, which leads me to my next question, something that's like near and dear to my heart, and it's something around your branding and your messaging and what is your client's perception, what is your employees' perception, what is your perception, what is your potential clients' perception of you. One of the things that I talk about on a regular basis, not only on my social media but with my clients, is how do you really shore up how your story connects with your audience. And again, your messaging, I think a lot of people have this sort of idea that my messaging just centers around like what am I posting on social media, or my branding is my website, or my branding is my really cool logo or my flashy business card. And it is those things, but it's a whole bunch of other things. It's like literally everything that your customer perceives about you and your business, right?
Mm.
So
Yes.
one of the things that I talk about on a regular basis and work with my clients on is how do you arrive at a message that's going to connect with your audience? So when they hear that, when they see that, when they taste that, when they smell that, they emphatically know on an emotional level, that's who I want to work with. Tevia is my company. That's where I want to go. Dakota is where I want to be. So what have you done as a CEO and a values-driven individual who really puts time and energy into their people to develop that brand message and kind of get that out to a larger audience?
I really believe it comes down to number one, and you're going to be the expert at this from marketing, is focusing on the pain point of the owner, right? It really, I don't really believe that our messaging is supposed to be about us. It's supposed to be about what are you going through and how can we solve that for you. And so number one, focusing on, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I have outside vendors that we hire. What do I need from them? What are my pain points? What are your pain points? So that getting that right so that someone will listen and go, oh, I have that problem. That's me. And then I think it's backing it up with those ethics to say, here's who we are and here's how we will deliver to you so that they pick you as their solution versus another option. And the back end of that also comes from my ethics is do what you say you're going to do. I back to your point actually earlier of what would you tell an early entrepreneur? I don't think entrepreneurship in this day and age is that difficult. And what I mean by that is if you have something valuable that they need and you do what you say you're going to do and you deliver something of quality and you do it on a timeline that you promised or god forbid earlier, you're going to find success
Hmm.
because I do think we live in a time where service is generally dead and nobody wants to give good deep service. And and there's too much oh, what's a word, flippantness, right, where it's like, well, whatever, I didn't deliver it or I didn't meet the deadline. I think if you're hitting deadlines, you do what you say you're going to do, you give really good service, you actually care, and you do that consistently. I don't think there's a way you can lose. And that's the message that we have to convey.
Say what you mean, do what you say, right? Can I unpack
Mm-hmm.
a couple things with your permission, just so that I heard you say in the beginning of
Yes.
that? So, branding, marketing, they're, from my perspective, there are two different channels. They work hand in hand. So I just wanted to clarify that. I'm a branding expert and I have built a marketing team to support my branding efforts. So I did want to clarify that, and I'm not challenging. I just wanted to clarify my
Sorry.
perspective. And no, 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 not at all. This is my chance to say something now. So one of the things that I heard you say is sort of it's only about the customer. And I don't disagree with that at all because perception is reality. Like literally customers' perception is what keeps you in business. And if they perceive you to be one way or the other, that's going to drive their emotional buying decisions. But if I may be so bold as to inject in that, there is another piece of that puzzle that should be absolutely front and center, and that your people need to be clearly understood and in alignment, whether it's one person or two person or a contractor that you're working with on the side, on what you do, why you do it, and
Oh,
who you specifically work for. And as you've said many times, which thank you, I'm giving you all the high fives I can. What freaking problem do you solve in a unique capacity that's different from everyone else? And then once you have those clarified, then your brand messaging is going to be able to be articulated not only by the corporation or the company, but every individual that's working there, right? So when your HR director goes home or your CEO, COO goes home and they're out with their social circle or they're networking with people, they're very clear on what you do and what that brand message is so that they can clearly articulate it. Does that make sense? So that would be my only injection on that.
and I totally agree. Absolutely. I think it goes back to, I'm calling it culture fit, right? Our team has to understand what it is we're doing and be in alignment with that to be a culture fit.
Absolutely. And in that vein, defining and marketing too. So getting the messaging down and the marketing to your ideal customer is a journey for every business. I have I have been doing entrepreneurial work and in multiple businesses now since 2006. And what I didn't know early on is that I wasn't trying to market to everybody. And I thought I was just trying to sell my product. Everybody needs my product. Come on, man. Don't you know who we think
Sure.
we are? Right. And so I was like, everybody should be buying from me. And I was like, wait a minute, something wasn't adding up. And one of the things I learned early on after my first business that didn't do so well is that my buyers had confusion on exactly what I was selling because I was doing a bunch of different things and I was like, I'll take that, I'll do this, I'll do that. So in that marketing, in defining and marketing to that ideal customer, it's a journey, right? And you mentioned that you're still working on identifying who that ideal customer consistently is. Can I ask, if I just may, just inquisitively, because this is what we help companies with, what strategies have you currently been utilizing or exploring to sort of hone in on what that target audience is?
Trial and error.
Ah,
Really. I mean, we actually this last year, so I'll back up and say we have always been 100% referral based. So before this last year, we never really did have our marketing figured out because it to us it was about deliver great service and the word of mouth will serve us, and that has always been what has worked for us. This last year, we did do a marketing initiative where for the first time we did paid marketing, so we did have to go out and say who are we speaking to, and we did understand that when we are asking for a lead, we need to be very specific in who we're talking to
hmm
try and get that to work. And, I think it's a combination, honestly, of we maybe didn't have that totally dialed in. But also, I think, and I'd love for you actually to speak to this. It's my belief in a professional services where it's very trust based, that it's a much harder market to build a cold lead via marketing online than maybe a product based business where here's the thing, you like the price, you like the quality, here's the thing, right? What we do is so trust based that we honestly have found a lot of trouble in hitting that and getting consistent leads out of that.
So there, yeah, thank you for that. And I suspect that you're not as far off as you think because if you're already doing 6 years in business and you're really starting to hone in on like paid advertising, for example, I feel like you probably have an idea what it is. But have you taken time to actually put that on paper so you can sort of matriculate with it and sort of look at it visually and say, my ideal avatar, my ideal customer is this, 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 and this, and they are not this, this, and this. Is that something that you've gone through?
Yes and no. I mean, I think we have a marketing firm that we work with, and funny enough, the owner of the firm owns like four companies. And every time they ask me, who's your avatar, I say, that owner right there.
Mm,
Like put him on paper. Everything about him, he loves us. He's so appreciative of what we do for his companies, and he loves to give our name out. You know, he's like our biggest cheerleader,
mm,
and we love the that relationship and just the appreciation of the partnership.
hmm.
And so that's definitely our avatar. I say that all the time. We definitely have honed in what we don't like in a client, what doesn't work for us. But I'm sure, as every entrepreneur, we could do better about documenting it on paper for sure.
Sure, 100%. One of the things I encourage my clients who have working personnel in their capacity is actually start with querying your team and see if they understand who they're selling to. If they were put on an island and they had to pick out from a group of people that were labeled accordingly and who they are and what they are and what they like and what they value and all those things, right? Imagine somebody wearing a bodysuit that says like, "This is who I am." And
Yeah.
does do your employees know who they would pick out? And, sort of blind study test this to sort of see like COO knows, HR does not know, line worker does, accountant definitely does not, et cetera, et cetera. Because when you get that, and there's ways you can go about doing that, when you get that data back and look at it, then it starts to sort of help you figure out, okay, so my team fills X, Y, and Z, but in fact, I fill over here. So that's one way to sort of cross section that. The other piece, if I make, since you asked,
Yes.
is understand the problem that you're solving, which it sounds like you do, but understand their problem. So those sometimes are different, right? So I thought I was solving this problem for my clients, right? But what it turned out is I wasn't actually solving the problem that my ideal client was looking for. And so once those two are in alignment, that's one piece. And then, of course, understanding your demographics and understanding your psychographics are really important to know. Like, I literally tell my clients, and we create this in the brand discovery, we actually create a human persona and we label it sort of like what's that old machine we used to play when we were kids? We had to like pull the body parts out. I can never remember the name of that damn game. You know where
Oh, operation.
operation. So we create an operation dummy and we literally label like all the different parts of our avatar so we understand visually what those psychographics look like. And it's interesting. It might seem benign, it might seem simple, but when you sort of have those markers right in front of you and everybody's in alignment with that and you're clearly in alignment with it, it sort of helps you just constantly remind you of what that looks like. And so that's one of the things we do. And then the other piece is once we have that outlined, we understand what their buying habits look like. What are their behaviors? How do they make decisions? And one of the best ways to do that is when you onboard a new client is asking them. So like, why did you choose Dakota? What was it that made you resonate with us? What was it that emotionally connected to you? Was it our pricing? Was it the CEO? Was it a referral? Like what was it? And so once you start to see those patterns you start getting all that inputs, you can start developing patterns around these people thought this is their perception. And there's a bunch of other things. So I won't bore you with all the details, but there's like a bunch of scientific stuff that we go through and then understanding like competitor evaluation, understanding one of the things I'm doing with a coach of mine right now is sorry, this is supposed to be about you, but I just want to share it with you.
I love it. This is
It,
helpful.
yeah, so is understanding my goals and aspirations as a client, right? So when I can clearly understand what maybe I'm a CEO that I'm working with, if you can understand my company's vision, not just that I need accounting or I need bookkeeping or I need like what you do, what are my goals as a business owner? What do those look like? And when you start to get a bunch of different people providing that input, you can start pulling out patterns and trends and sort of like really honing in on what that person looks like, right? So anyway, I'll stop on that because I'm boring you. But
No,
that's one of the ways that we go about doing that with our clients. I don't know if that's helpful or
I,
not, but
I it actually is. And that is one thing we do is we beg our entrepreneurs to sit down and give us goals because we do, as I said, we give proactive advice on the financials. And so if we actually know their goals, we will help them hold accountability to that.
mm,
And we'll come back around and maybe to some extent kind of report on that for them because maybe they're not looking at it every month. And
mhm,
so we can come back around as an accountability partner and say,
mhm.
hey, that goal that you brought up, you're killing it. Or, well, here's some adjustments that would help you get on with that.
I love that check-in. That's really phenomenal. Well done on that. In terms of your advertising, and I just always like to hear what people say about this, because this if I have anything frustrating in my landscape of marketing, it has to do with digital the digital ethos, like social media, paid advertising, Google versus Meta, Meta versus YouTube. What do I post? How do I post? How do I attack this big, giant, ugly beast? What are you currently doing in in that digital realm in order to spread knowledge, share insights, talk to your ideal customer that we just sort of identified? Where do you sort of play with Takoti in that space of just the digital amplification?
Yes, I have quite an acknowledgement that I think there's a shift happening right now between the company as a brand and maybe the CEO, and who they are. And it seems to be the conversation that I'm hearing is that people want to know who they're working with. And that's probably not new, but I think it's getting more and more popular. And so a conversation we've been having is that I definitely have to personally be out there and be having a personal brand separate from the company. And so one thing we've been working on is just content about are we, who am I, putting that out. I will say it's a constant struggle because as I love, my favorite thing is engaging with entrepreneurs and having a one-on-one conversation that's really in depth. I don't particularly love making content. It's not something I think it's because I like the engagement, right?
Mhm.
And staring at a flat camera and trying to have that same engagement or the play off of the conversation is not there. It's one-sided. That's not my favorite thing. So to answer your question, we're making content, we're doing the best that we can, but it's a constant struggle for me of how to replicate the natural conversation that happens between two people and the draw that I have to that versus
Totally.
a camera.
Yeah, I feel your pain on that. I struggled with it early on, which, once I sort of started to figure out and experiment with it, I came to the epiphany that my true talents lied in helping other people do that. So, like helping you build your personal brand, and that's what we do. So, if you want to talk offline, shameless plug, let's get together,
Yeah.
entrepreneur to entrepreneur, and I can sort of share with some of the things that we do as personal brand development because that's what I do. I take CEOs who already have successful businesses but want to sort of proliferate that and amplify that to more of a more personal brand concept, and that's what I help my clients do. So, one of the things that I just sort of I would, if I was you, if I may, you're very well versed in what you do as a business, and you're very well spoken, and you have great camera presence. I would start trying to position you in a thought leadership capacity, and then you really, instead of actually having to talk to somebody, if you will, but what you're doing is you're imagining you're having a conversation with your ideal avatar, and you positioning yourself with thought leadership around your industry, other industries, just sort of showing people that would potentially hire you because we don't hire, and we're all consumers, right? Think about your buying patterns. We don't hire the product per se. I'm not hiring the Dakota
Right.
process per se. Well, that should be buttoned up and shored up and work fantastically well, but I'm more buying what values, what emotional connectivity can I build with
Right.
this brand. So you're absolutely spot on. I love where your headspace is. If you can find a way to get that voice out there and connect with peer to peer on your level, like people who are at your thought seed level, I think you might find a lot of success with that. So I love that your headspace is around there in terms of just sort of business ethos as and on like a whole thing. One of the things I heard you talk about, and this is sort of piggybacking off our last question. Damn, we're running out of time. I said 30 minutes, and look at you, we've been talking for 53. Is this whole idea of imposter syndrome? And I asked you that question specifically because everybody has a different approach on how they tackle this idea. And for those of you who are not familiar with the topic or the concept, you should be. Imposter syndrome is sort of centers around why would anybody want to listen to me? There's a whole bunch of other people out there who are doing this already. Like, who am I? I'm just this little old person over here. And it's crazy because one of the things that I learned early on in the power of social media is that you have an audience of potentially 7.5 billion people on the planet. And if you can figure out what that voice is, if you can figure out what that platform that you have is, that personal brand in your case, that solution, that problem that you're solving, then you have the opportunity to connect with that person on an individual level, right? And make a difference on a one-to-one basis. I think everybody thinks, okay, we got to have numbers, we got to have mass, we got to have followers, we got to have all these things. And it's like, no, bro, take a back seat and roll back a little bit and think about how can you connect on an individual level with just one person? What does that conversation look like? And so in terms of you and your imposter syndrome, when you think about going out on social media or you think about meeting up people and having these conversations, are there any different things that you've sort of learned to focus on or develop around to kind of build confidence and sort of unclutter your mind around, you know what, I'm actually pretty badass. I actually have a message. I'm going to share this.
Yeah. Well, actually, you touched on it. So I have a speaking coach, and one of the best tips she ever gave me, because I wouldn't say mine stems from imposter syndrome. It stems from a want to be seen as genuine.
Hmm.
And the warmth comes from engaging with another human, which is harder, at least for me, to do with a camera.
Hmm.
So mine comes from I have a hard time reaching that same space speaking, to the camera. And what she said to me, which was very enlightening, was pretend, first of all, pick the person. You said avatar. For her comment, it was that you feel is the most supportive of you, that you really have warm and engaging conversations with. And that for me is my COO. We just really enjoy each other and have a lot of synergy. And she's my cheerleader for what I do and getting out for the company. And
Hmm.
so she said, pretend that you're speaking to her. You're not speaking to this dead cold camera that's
Hmm.
not giving you anything. Pretend you're speaking to her, which is easier said than done because there's no engagement back. But the mindset of even shifting there is that's been helpful to get
Hmm.
through that.
Is this your speaking coach? Is that what you said?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a great advice. Can I add a piece to that if I may?
please, please.
I like to disrupt things as well if you haven't figured out. But
I'm all for it.
I would suggest, especially if you're camera shy or you're uncertain on what you might want to say, I would actually do what I call a third person camera, right? And the third person camera would be you not necessarily staring at the camera, but sort of taking a profile shot. And so you don't really even have to see it. It's sort of kind of off here in your peripheral. But I would bring your COO into the conference room or into the recording room. And I would give her a list of conversational talking points that you actually want her to ask you. And then you get to have that conversation back with her and then have somebody on your production team cut that up. So the sound bites that we use aren't necessarily her, but your pieces that you can then redistribute, repurpose, evergreen, et cetera out. So that way you actually get to sit here casually having a conversation with COO. That's a really great question. I appreciate you taking the time to, and then you get to articulate that and like go into it. And then you don't have the camera up in your face jamming you out, but then you actually get to sit there and be like, oh, yeah, 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 yada, yada, yada. You follow where I'm going?
Yes, I love that idea.
Yeah, so cool. I got other ones if you want to talk about them. All right. Well, we're running out of time. So, Tevia, this has been a really cool conversation. I love your delivery. I love the fact that you have a working grasp of what's going on in your entire company, but most importantly, that you are taking the time to develop the people and the processes and all the things that ultimately keep your business in alignment to the audience you're trying to sell to. So, where's the best way people can find you?
We're on all the platforms. TakotaAccounting.com is our website. Takota Accounting is all of our social handles. We're very easy to find. So we're out there and we're
And that
happy to help.
and that'll be in the show notes as well. So all your links will be in there when we produce the show. So if anybody listening wants to track that down right now, you just by the time you're listening to this, just click on the link below. But that is TEKODA, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
cool, cool, cool.
Takota. Mhm.
All right. Well, man, we covered a lot, so thank you. Your approach to disrupting the accounting industry is very refreshing, at least for people like me, because I like to take risks. It sounds like your team is sort of more on the risk-oriented side, which is not necessarily what bookkeepers and accounting firms are necessarily known for. Sort of like your curiosity seekers, like how can we change and disrupt the
Yes.
paradigm that has just been like existing for hundreds of years? And is there more creative ways to do things? And there's always more creative ways to do things. And so I love that you're kind of taking that on. So thank you for joining us on the Branding Laboratory. I really appreciate your time and your energy and your thoughtful insights. And thank you for listening to me ramble on about a variety of different things.
I have so appreciated you, Deevo. Thank you so much for your insights.
All right. So stay tuned for the next episode. If you are looking to grow your brand, if you're looking for insights from amazing CEOs like my guest today, Tevia, the Branding Laboratory is where it's at. And every single week, actually 10 times a week right now, I bring on CEOs from all over the planet, like literally from everywhere. And my team goes out and scrubs the surface of social media and websites and everything to find really cool people like Tevia who have value, who are purpose driven, who are doing really cool things to disrupt, to shake up, to be more creative, to be curious. So if you're you're looking for that sort of stuff, make sure you subscribe to the show below, follow us on social media. And Tevia, this is a shameless plug for you. If you enjoyed your time here, drop us a review because that's going to help me find more people like you. So thank you for your time.
I will. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Branding Laboratory. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Connect with us on social media for more branding tips and insights. And remember, your story matters. Until next time, keep building and sharing your unique brand story. I'll see you soon.